It is Friday, December 12th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Game Award episode of LTPS. We have a lot going on. The TGAs were last night, on top of everything else that happened throughout the week, so we have a lot to go over. So let's begin, as always, with a very brief reminder for the PS Plus Essential December lineup, where those games are still live on PSN. Make sure you claim those. We also have PS Plus Extra and Premium, the December lineup announced as well, going live on the 16th. And for PS Plus Extra, we have one game already available to play right now. That is Skate Story. It launched day one into PS Plus Extra, which is a very weird-looking avant-garde skateboarding game, which I hear is very, very good. So if you're on PS Plus Extra, you can download and play that right now. But elsewhere on the lineup, going live on the 16th, you have Assassin's Creed Mirage, Wo Long Fallen Dynasty, Granblue Fantasy Relink, Planet Coaster, Cat Quest 3, big fan of that, Lego Horizon, which if you don't claim it through Essential but then become an extra member down the road, you have some time to play that game, and then Paw Patrol Grand Prix and Paw Patrol World. That's some big time stuff there, Daddy-O. Going into PS Plus Premium, we have one lone PlayStation 2 game, Soul Calibur 3, which we were most definitely expecting. So Extra actually looks very strong for December, so between that and Essential, I mean, you can't really complain. A lot of heavy hitters, and December had all those bonus titles, so can't really go wrong there. But anyway, moving on to our first news story. There's a new background for the PlayStation 5's Welcome Hub, and this one is very seasonal. It's a nice little cozy fireplace with some glass PlayStation symbols on there, and this one is extra unique in that it does play a fire crackling sort of ambient sound in the background. So pair that with the new beta for the Welcome Hub, where when you're sitting in the Welcome Hub, not on the main home screen, but in the widget submenus, you can have that sort of disappear, and then your TV will just sit idle with a nice little cozy PlayStation fireplace background. I know we're really reaching here, but hey, at the very minimum, it does actually work out quite well. So that's available right now server side. Next up, PlayStation Wrap-Up 2025 is available right now on PlayStation.com, which most of you probably know. Every year you can do this on Sony's site where you can log in with your PSN ID and get a very neat cursory glance at all of your gameplay statistics throughout the past year. So you can see gameplay hours, trophies earned, a breakdown of total games played, what you played the most of, and also they're now showing you how much time you played on the portal if you have one, so that's also cool to see. And they even show you what controller you use the most as well, so they're always tracking a number of things. It's just what they're willing to tell you, so that's always really cool. I apologize for the poor B-roll here because, quite frankly, I can't show you my gameplay hours because, well, my trophies are intended to be private because I don't want to spoil 30 Platinum's Part 4. So I can't really show you much. I'm probably using alternate accounts to show you the very few gameplay hours on that as an example, but you sort of get the deal there. I will say this, though. Wrap-ups do not track PS3 or PS Vita gameplay hours, so there's that info that it's not going to telegraph too much, but either way, there's that. And also, I think this year's kind of disappointing, is it not? Previous years, they would give you like a month-by-month breakdown, and that was way more fascinating. There's like less pages and less telemetry they're showing you this year, so I personally found Wrap-Up 2025 to be like lame. It wasn't really that cool, but it's still worth doing, I guess, to see what they do show you, and also getting that PSN avatar as well. Now, before getting into the main TGA announcements, we do have some other PS Studio news stories to go over, like, for example, the Deviation Games canceled project, which was codenamed Project Draconis. Now, if you remember, we had a story a while back now at this point where we did connect the dots on what that game was, which it was the goopy monster-looking game, if you remember that small clip we had. So it was only a few seconds where a giant goop monster is climbing this tower, and we figured out back then that that game was the canceled Deviation title, codenamed Project Draconis. So the new story here is that Dust Golem, who originally had the footage, they now released a lot more of the footage. like 10 something minutes of gameplay on YouTube, and so we can see some very early gameplay of what was a pretty by the books third person shooter. Now I will say the reason why Dust Golem kept calling the game Ooze is because the little monsters in the game are called Ooze or something to that effect. I mean, the whole point of the game is that there's these sort of amorphous monsters that are sort of lurking around, and that's what you're fighting. But PlayStation backed out of the project, and the game's canceled. It's probably never going to see the light of day because Deviation Games, we now know, is closed, right? They could not find a different publisher and start up another game, so based on whatever this thing was, on certain milestone builds, whether it's playtesting or milestone builds, PlayStation probably just wasn't happy with the progress and they backed out. It is hard to provide more commentary on the game, though. It's so early, right? And so you can't really say like, oh, I can see why it was canceled. If anything, I would posit that there's maybe a slightly unique mechanic at play here, and that there's maybe some gameplay elements that could have been explored with amorphous monsters that can sort of be anything, right? So at least initially looking at the early gameplay, I'm like, I can kind of see the direction of it, but it's really hard to say. It's just one of those things, though, where it's always cool to see this stuff where we otherwise probably would have never seen it to begin with, right? So the Ooze game is no more. Next up for Helldivers 2, the Killzone 2 Warbond is coming back to the game on December 18th, and they're doing a really cool thing where if you had bought even one item back when it was originally available, you're now going to get upgraded to the full Warbond for free. So if you did buy an item before, then you might want to log back in, make sure you claim the whole thing. If not, it will be available on December 18th for 1,500 super credits, and so that's again going to include the SA-52 assault rifle, the SA-11 SMG, the PLAS-39 accelerator rifle, and then some capes, passives, the player card, player titles, things like that. It's still like so cool to see Helghast walking around in the Helldivers gameplay universe, so just wanted to quickly call that one out, that it's coming back very soon. Moving on to the EVO 2026 tournament lineup, where the news here is that there's no Marvel Tokon in that lineup, now confirmed by the organization. Which, there's some curiosity going on of like, okay, EVO takes place June 2026. Does that mean Marvel Tokon will not be out by that time? And it's hard to say, of course, because I think it's a very likely situation of if the game does come out before June 2026, then it's simply a matter of the announcements not aligning, so they want to at least let people know that, hey, Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, Fatal Fury, Granblue, the usual suspects are going to be there on top of any of the new ones, but something where the release date announcement not being confirmed just yet, they can't say that until it is confirmed, then they'll throw it in after the fact. So there's still a lot of time for that to happen, but otherwise there is still the distinct possibility that Tokon comes out after EVO 2026 as well. We don't know. We have to wait and see. Next up, one of the India Hero Project games, Fishbowl, was confirmed for April 2026. So no exact date, but they did put a month on this. And as a reminder, Fishbowl is that cozy slice of life game where you're playing as a young woman moving into an apartment and you're working from home, which for some people, myself included, I love those types of games. So, and we always like to champion a lot of the Hero Project games. And so one of the first India Hero ones is coming out April 2026. Moving on to some Black Friday news for PlayStation 5 hardware, both in the UK and the US. And unsurprisingly, Sony still had some somewhat aggressive deals to the point where it was, for the most part, dominating the sales charts. And so we have some data coming in from Matt Piscatella of Circana, which tracks video game sales data here in the US. And so PS5 accounted for 47% of Black Friday hardware sales, where Nintendo Switch 2 was second with 24%, and the next Playground was number 3 at 14%. And that has definitely been a very fascinating thing to see for the past 2-ish weeks, is that this next Playground thing, which is more or less a PlayStation Eye game or sort of PlayStation Eye hardware, I'm seeing so many people say like, oh, it's like a Kinect. And it's like, sure, but you know me, the PlayStation slant, iToy predates the Kinect. So I'm like, well, camera titles were on PlayStation. Point being, it's basically like an iToy or something, right? It's a all-in-one camera box where you can play some family-friendly games. It kind of speaks to that Wii audience in a way, but it was so funny seeing that like chart And then you even have Matt Piscatello go, I had no idea this thing was a thing at all. And everyone else in the sort of core like gaming audience was like, I've never heard of this thing, myself included. So sure enough, it was number 3. Over in the UK, we have data coming in from the GfK, where PS5 had 62% of sales, Switch 2 had 23%, and Xbox 10%. Now, obviously, it should go without saying, but Xbox was not running any sales whatsoever. They're fairly disinterested in selling Xbox hardware nowadays, so you can't really be too shocked that you have Next Playground charting when it's like, well, they're not really running sales on Xbox hardware, and it's pretty expensive relative to the competition. So it's not really shocking whatsoever, but I mean, it's still encouraging sales for the PlayStation side of things, which it was definitely a good time to buy PS5 hardware in light of the price increases that the console has seen. Now, a lot of you probably saw the video I did on this game yesterday, but it's still very big news, in that we finally have our first PS3 emulation title on PlayStation 5 released commercially, and that is Cloudberry Kingdom, which came out in 2013 on PSN, Xbox Live Arcade, and Steam, and this port, or this emulation port, is being done by Redo Apps, which is a fairly new emulation studio, very similar to Implicit Conversions, where their entire model is that they have a proprietary in-house emulation suite where they're working on PS1, PS2, and yes, PS3 games to port to modern platforms. And so in this case, we had Cloudberry Kingdom ship on PlayStation 5 as a native PS4, PS5 version, and a PlayStation 3 edition, a separate one, only playable on PlayStation 5, where if you launch the game, it is running under emulation. Which it's so cool that we have a native PS5 one to compare it to, because natively shipped on PlayStation 5, it's a nice crisp 4K. Under emulation with PlayStation 3, it's 1080p, it's got some issues, it's got some like audio jitters, things like that. It's still very early days, and the studio's already said that much, but it's still working. It does have save states. It's not very like rewind robust. It's not very snappy in that regard, but it's just a very big step in the right direction, because we also had the co-founder explain that they're not working with our PCS3, and so it can't really be compared to 10 plus years of a community-driven emulator that has been tested for 10-something years, but they did explain that for this particular game, they disabled the SPU functions to get it working reliably, and they're doing HLE emulation, so that's high-level emulation, so that's still for broad compatibility, but it's not really dialed in the same way that it would be for low-level emulation, which is a lot more resource intensive, but as far as compatibility, it's definitely going to be a lot more rich and reliable as far as how they're emulating it. So there's a lot of different ways to break this down, but in essence, we do have our first example running on PlayStation 5. It's a very modest looking game, and it's very similar to what I said in the conversation yesterday, what I've been saying for years, so I know I'm always a broken horse when I talk about this stuff, right? But it's a matter of, is PlayStation 3 emulation technically feasible? Sure. On PlayStation 5, yes, but I mean, there's caveats with that. The big caveat being, one, financial viability as far as the amount of resources that would go into it. It's very resource intensive versus platforms like PS1 and PS2. So you have to highly optimize those games, and it's going to be surely on a title by title basis, which Redo Apps has already explained. It will be pretty much like that, where they'll have to dial in each particular game to make sure that it runs reliably. So they won't have broad compatibility right away. That is probably going to be a very similar case for Implicit for their back burner PS3 emulation project. But there's that aspect. The other one is simply that for AAA titles, that will be a problem even on PlayStation 3, because those games will be CPU bound. The issue is when first-party games were heavily leaning into the cell processor, the SPUs, which that is first-party games, the most desirable ones, your Resistance, your Killzone, your Motorstorm, those games utilize the SPUs in a very heavy loaded way. And so those games will be problematic on PlayStation 5, right? I mean, it's just one of those things where I mentioned 5-something years ago, like, it's going to take years for us to get here, and it's going to be very early days, modest games like this. It's going to go at a snail's pace, and here is the first sort of movement from a snail showing us PS3 emulation. It's cool, I love it, but I mean, it's pretty much panning out exactly how I thought it would, but either way, it's still historic to see our first PS3 emulation game. Okay, let's get into some TGA news, beginning with this story about how Kotaku put out this report of how expensive it can be to get your game and trailer showcased at the Game Awards, which I believe it was Kotaku previously, either last year or the year before that, but it was the same thing where they ran a story based on anonymous sources that were close to the show itself, outlining how much it does cost, which understandably, it's a lot of money. It's 6 figures easily. It depends on the runtime, if you're trying to do a 30-second trailer, a minute, or 3 minutes. So for this year, they do say that for a 1-minute trailer that can cost up to $450,000, and a 3-minute trailer is a little bit over $1 million. So it is very expensive to have your game in front of that many people. But the thing about the TGAs, and this much is also outlined in the report, which isn't nearly as flashy, but the way that Jeff Keighley structures that show, there's an allocation for pretty much every portion of the show in a lot of different ways. So there is an allocation of time to the show basically being pro bono, or that spotlight, right? So if it's something Jeff is personally invested in, or if he wants to champion it, it's pro bono. They get in there for free. There's discounted rates for indies or smaller studios. Obviously there's perhaps a bidding process where people want to put in to get their games in front of the TGAs, but there's an allocation of time for that. And then there's an allocation of time where it is simply for sale. So it's not like the whole 3 hours is for sale. It's broken down in allocations, and that's the model. So if you're going to pay for it and you want 3 minutes, it is going to cost you a pretty penny. Now, as for the actual TGA announcements, as we often do with big live streams, we will recap the PlayStation relevant announcements, and this is a 3-hour show, so forgive me if I leave something out. But if you did miss the show, if you were in Europe or something, if it was a weird time, you wanted to skip it, we've got the recap for you right here. Here's the biggest, most pertinent announcements for PlayStation, which is in the pre-show, we had Pragmata. That got a release date for April 26th, 2026, and a demo is live right now on Steam with a PS5 demo coming later as well. They also confirmed a Switch 2 version. Opening into the main show, we have Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic, directed by Casey Hudson. That was a big reveal, and so that one is confirmed. Larian revealed their newest game, their biggest title yet, a new Divinity title, which this is the tease for the big statue in the Mojave Desert. So they had a big deal with showing off that game during the TGAs. Then we go into For Loop, which is Bad Robot Games and the PlayStation publishing title we just recently covered. So they were willing to show a gameplay trailer and confirm it's a 4-player roguelite game. We'll talk about that later in a separate story for more details on that title, but moving on to Coven of the Chickenfoot. This is Bruce Straley's new game, formerly of Naughty Dog fame, his new studio, Wildflower Interactive, and so that one was showed off as well. Very different looking game from Bruce Straley, but I'm sure there's a lot more that we don't know about that game just yet. Moving on to Ontos, I believe that's how you say that. That was announced. That's from the creators of Soma. That's a spiritual successor coming next year, 2026. Then Resident Evil Requiem, the trailer revealing Leon Kennedy is indeed in the game, and he's interwoven with the plot, and so that's where there's some more action-oriented sequences going on there. Next up was Order of the Sinking Star. That is Jonathan Blow's next game, where it's puzzles, of course, naturally, but they're like intertwined puzzles that build out a world map, and there's like 1,000-something puzzles. It's really insane. So that is Jonathan Blow's new game. Then we have a new trailer for Exodus that is coming early 2027. That's the sci-fi RPG from former BioWare devs and from Wizards of the Coast, which they had another announcement, which is Warlock Dungeons and Dragons. That was announced as well, with a gameplay trailer coming next summer, and the game is launching in 2027. So unfortunately, we only had a cinematic trailer for that. Next up was Control Resonant. That was announced, which is a new Control game coming 2026. It's going to be Jesse Faden's, I think, her brother, and it's more melee combat, happening in Manhattan, so it's a much more open environment compared to the first Control. Next is Gang of Dragon announced, so that is Toshihiro Nagoshi's new game, and it looks a lot like Yakuza, so they left Sega to do this, which is fascinating for sure. After that, we had a new trailer for Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight. That is coming May 26th, 2026. Then big Tomb Raider announcements. We have Tomb Raider Catalyst for 2027, a new big mainline entry. And then Tomb Raider Atlantis is coming next year, which is a PS1 remake. Looks incredible. This was a very strong showing. After that was Forest 3 announced, which this one really stuck out to me. It's very unusual. Got some neat monster designs in there. Not too many details at the time of recording this right now, but Forest 3 was announced. After that was Diablo 4 Lord of Hatred coming April 28th, 2026. Deadpool was confirmed for Marvel Rivals next season, so that is coming up very soon. 007 First Light, the Lenny Kravitz character, was revealed. Next up is Saros, a story trailer for the game with a slight delay to April 30th. We'll talk more about that in a separate story. No Law announced by Neon Giant. That one also looks very weird. Next up is Total War Warhammer 40K announced as well. So that is a big mashup there. Ace Combat 8 Wings of Thief announced. That's coming 2026. New mainline entry for Ace Combat. Been a long time for that one. Then Star Wars Galactic Racer announced, coming 2026. Out of Words is a stop-motion co-op game that was revealed as well. And then Phantom Blade Zero got a release date trailer, coming September 9th, 2026. Then Mega Man Dual Override coming 2027, a new Mega Man game finally. And then after that was a Neo 3 demo dropping January 29th. Highguard was announced from the creators of Apex Legends and Titanfall, where they made a new studio, and 60-something people worked on this game in complete secrecy, and now they are launching a free-to-play game on January 16th, 2026. So about 7 weeks away, we have this game announced, revealed, full gameplay, and it's dropping free-to-play January 16th, 2026. That was the show closing announcement, which for some, I think that was definitely a misfire, depending on what you're into, obviously. So that was more of a misfire for me. Although it is pretty shocking to have that happen sometimes, where it's like you have a full team, a new studio, they're able to work on this in complete secrecy, have gameplay ready to show, and also it launching very soon as well. So not as exciting to announce a hero shooter, but hey, at the very minimum, that was surprising to see. So the TGAs this year, I liked them. I mean, there's a lot of things in there that I am genuinely interested in, more so than pretty much all the other live stream events that we had this past year. So at least in my book, this was the strongest showing. Certainly not the strongest TGA, but, you know, still it was, I enjoyed it thoroughly. It's just, man, I really hate how long these things are, so that still bothers me like crazy. And what bothers me more, right, and I might throw this into the reactions video that I'll upload maybe later today if I have the time. So I recorded reactions. It's probably going to be more of a supercut separate upload. But I get so annoyed when we're wasting time. When we're doing the Muppets thing and Miss Piggy jokes, I'm just sitting here going, I can't believe this is eating up showtime. I cannot fathom how that is eating up showtime. 3 hours is really long, my man. I would love if the pace was just a little bit faster, which, you know, is at direct odds of the whole wrap it up thing where people can't, you know, give a proper speech when they're accepting awards. But the weird thing is, I almost feel like there weren't nearly as many awards actually happening this year. You know, it felt like they pushed a lot of those into the sort of sidebar category where Jeff will spitfire like 5 or 8 of them or something like that. It seems like they did more of that this year versus previous years, but I also can't remember a 3-hour show that easily from 2024, of course. So, but that's sort of my just coming off the show reaction. Definitely a solid show for me. Now, as for the awards themselves, Clair Obscur predictably took home a lot of them because they had the most nominations in TGA history, actually. So that was incredible, right? So the game was a favorite to win in most of its categories. that's pretty much what happened, and it did take home Game of the Year as well, which was a beautiful moment for Samfall Interactive, and it's also really cool that the running tradition, if they can help it, is to have the previous year winner do the nominee ceremony. So that was Nicolas Doucet up there presenting for the award, and Samfall was able to take home the big TGA win, which was awesome to see. So SIE didn't pick up anything. I think the only thing they did win as far as like PlayStation adjacent was The Last of Us Season 2 winning Best Adaptation, which I don't want to say is surprising. It might be one of those things where, like, you know, for me, it's still like a 7 out of 10. For as much time as I've sat on Season 2, I think they definitely missed on a lot of areas, but might have simply been a consequence of everything else wasn't nearly as good. But I know for some people, they really thought like Twisted Metal should have been up there for Best Adaptation. So I don't disagree with that win, but I feel like if other things were there, or if it was just 1 year difference of other adaptations, Season 2 was not winning. So that was, I think, the only singular win. But, you know, it's not surprising when you look at just how good Clair Obscur is received. I want to start the game very soon, of course, which I'm trying to do once 30 Platinums Part 4 is out. But when you see the reception to it, you can get a real sense of why it earned as many awards as it did. So congrats to Samfall for sure. Okay, let's move into the two separate stories we have for the two PlayStation announcements at the TGAs. The first one being 4Loop. So this is the Bad Robot and PlayStation Studios, I want to say, collaboration. It seems pretty apparent that SIE probably signed this game on very recently, since the game was far along enough. And that was pretty well telegraphed from the 3-month-old Reddit post where Mike Booth at the time on the Left 4 Dead subreddit was saying, hey, sign up for playtesting on this game. So it seemed like they definitely had something playable like very soon, right? So that's why we got the gameplay trailer here. This doesn't appear to be a proper PlayStation Studios game, more of a publishing agreement. SIE does not own the IP, but we do have some details on what this game is, because I don't think it really showed all that well. As I'm watching it, I'm like, is this a 4-player roguelite? And so that, in essence, is what's going on here. So over on the PlayStation blog, Mike Booth did answer some questions about the game, and he confirmed that it is a roguelite, but he was also asked directly, what the game loop is and what are players working towards. So Mike said, quote, "The goal of the players is to draw the attention of the mothership by disrupting the aliens' global mining operation and then somehow destroy it. Each time the 4-player team succeeds in a mission, they make choices to improve their equipment, building out a unique kit to survive the epic boss battle at the end of the act. If the team completes all 3 acts, they defeat the mothership and save the world. All of this, of course, easier said than done. There are also various layers of meta progression, as well as lots of actual details to learn about how the world works, like blinkberries, to give you an edge for your next run." So I'm not sure how enthusiastic people may or may not sound with that quick synopsis, but I think that's probably the best way that it was explained. With watching the trailer now, you have much better context on what it is. And I wanted to add that little text blurb in the previous LTPS where we covered this game announcement, because it was very important that the CEO of Bad Robot did put out there that, hey, this is not like Left 4 Dead. We're doing something pretty different. And now that we see it, it is very different. I think it's one of those games where it might not show well, but you never know till you play it. In a really weird way, I'm sitting there watching it going, well, that's kind of a slightly different concept. I mean, I'm sure there's co-op or 4-player roguelite experiences out there that I can't think of off the top of my head, but it's definitely different enough, I would find, which is really hard to do in today's environment. So I'm always cautiously optimistic. We'll see. But it's also something where I think you get the game out there, you get it playable, and I think SIE now knows that with any kind of multiplayer game. You don't make these big 9-figure bets, release it, and it fails. Put something out there as soon as possible, and the player feedback is going to determine if that game will live or die. All right, moving on to new details for Housemarque's Saros, where, yes, during the TGAs, they did confirm a slight delay from March to April 30th, so they probably want to move out of that very crowded March area, which does quite obviously align with what they even did during the TGAs, which is have Raul come out and present the game. And the TGAs is a very big event. So for Sony to do this much for Housemarque, I'm already like very in love with the fact that, you know, they really believe in the project. So to have Housemarque go from the arcade style bullet hell games to Returnal and now seeing additional investment for this, that's just the thing I'm really proud of. But it was a slight delay, but pre-orders are available now. So that was the key story trailer that unlocked the pre-orders. So now it's available at retail and also the PlayStation Store. It will cost $69.99 USD, which I would hope after the whole Returnal $70 fiasco, people at the very minimum be a little bit more into this game and know that there is an experience waiting for them if it does deliver, which there is going to be a digital deluxe edition as well. That's going to include some armor sets themed from PS Studios. So that's really cool because there's a God of War Midgard one, an Astra one from Returnal, Hands of Shore, and also Onryo. So that was really neat to see. The only bummer is that the Digital Deluxe Edition does have early access. So you can play the game early on April 28th instead of the 30th if you're willing to pay more and pre-order from the PlayStation Store, which definitely sucks. But, you know, it's one of those things where it doesn't bother me because, like, look, I like this game a lot. I'm very, very excited for it. There is pretty much nothing that is going to get me to pay full price or even more for a digital game on PSN. I simply won't do it. It just doesn't matter. I really don't care. I will wait the 2 days for a physical copy. It sucks. Don't get me wrong. It definitely does to sort of incentivize players to pay more to get the game 2 days early. And, you know, that's a model that does work. So SI is clearly probably going to do that more and more. So that is, I don't like seeing it. I don't. But does it bother me that much? Not really. I will say, as for the game itself, the story trailer, that is also something that is so encouraging because that was the great thing about Returnal, is that was Housemarque trying a narrative in their games for the first time, and it's still very much a gameplay first experience, but the narrative was genuinely engaging. The thing with Returnal is that it was very isolated with Celine, and that's it, right? She's kind of going through her own demons. In this game, you have other characters. There's this hub world where Raul is going to be interacting with them after every run. So I'm hoping that's similar to a Hades thing where, you know, every time you're dying, you're getting new dialogue options and things to talk about with people. And so that really evolves over time. I really hope they don't obfuscate story details. That's what I don't like about Returnal, is that you really don't know exactly what's going on. They kind of lay it down, but a lot of it's left up to interpretation. I've never liked that kind of storytelling. I like when it's very clear, this is what's going on, and this is the story we want to intently tell you. So I'm hoping it's that. And also with the gameplay itself, I mean, I'm fine with it being more evolutionary and not revolutionary. That's totally fine. Be more by the books. With Returnal, it works. I don't want the new parry mechanic and also the Soltari shield to be like necessary things that you have to do in the field. If you can play the game in a very similar run and gun way and you can get through the combat scenarios without using the new things, that I would prefer as well. But otherwise, still very excited. The really cool thing too is that the Celine actress is in this game as well for one of the hub world area people, I think. So it's just, for me at least, it should go without saying, this is my most anticipated game for 2026, which is saying something next to Grand Theft Auto 6. Let's get into some third-party news stories, with this one being quite a big one, and that is Call of Duty Black Ops 7. We have seen that all signs are pointing to this game not doing nearly as well as prior Call of Duty entries, and certainly not doing as well in the face of Battlefield 6, which has been seeing some massive commercial success. And so the team for Call of Duty and also Activision staff put up this update on their site where they admit Black Ops 7 has not met expectations from some fans, is how they phrase it, and so going forward, they will not do back-to-back releases of Modern Warfare or Black Ops games anymore. Now, I don't really want to speak on this with that much authority at all because, quite frankly, I don't follow Call of Duty nearly as much anymore. I haven't played the multiplayer or the games, period, in years now at this point. It just would appear as though, from the outside looking in, that there's some novelty wearing off for the franchise, which was bound to happen, although it's very particular language when I say some novelty, because to be honest, a bad Call of Duty is still, you can see, charting no problem, and it's still outselling the vast majority of games that came out this year. A bad Call of Duty is still a commercially successful game. So it's just a matter of, there's been some player drop-off probably for what maybe feels a little bit too samey of an entry. For those that care about the campaign, there's very little there this year compared to prior years, which are also very hit or miss sometimes. And then you've got Battlefield 6, which looks far more attractive as a much different gameplay style and a return to that franchise that looks like it's been genuinely fun for some players to bounce over to that and get some fun there. So for their sort of annual shooter games, it seems like Battlefield 6 was probably the place to be for a lot of longtime COD players. Now, it was also pretty big news this past week that one of Square Enix's biggest shareholders, their third biggest shareholder at 14.36%, the Singapore activist investment group 3D Investment Partners, they have been criticizing Square for a few months now at this point, and they also very recently put out a 112-page PDF presentation, again criticizing Square's new leadership for the stagnation in the HD and SD games segment, specifically pointing out the failures and slow performance compared to other Japanese publishers like Nintendo, Capcom, Konami, Bandai Namco, which I'll tell you, it's a very long presentation, and this was a very busy week, so I really could not look into this much further beyond the cursory information that I just gave you. But they are an activist investment group. They have 14%, which is quite sizable. They're rallying other shareholders to try and get some backing on something going on here, or they want some sort of, change in leadership, and they want Square to do something different. The thing is, I looked through the PDF. I'm not really sure what they're proposing. I'm sure it's in there to some degree, but they're just not happy with the prior years. I'll say this, with Square, at least for that segment, HD games, and their bread and butter is Final Fantasy in this case. 7 Rebirth was an incredible game, and just it simply didn't move nearly as much as Remake could in 2020, which is hard to do when that game had the sort of the COVID boom and the novelty of it being a remake of FF7. It was a perfect storm for that game to sell as well as it did. Sequels also tend to not sell as good as their predecessors. So, sure, the game's going to multiple platforms now, but there's only so much you can reasonably do. So they did what I thought was a great job with Rebirth, alongside 16, which I think, that's sort of what you try to do is take risks. Final Fantasy 16, even if that might not have worked out for them, that is what they were supposed to do, is take a risk with a big IP like that and reinvent the envelope and change what it means to be a Final Fantasy. Maybe they go back to the drawing board and try something a little bit more by the books and see if that works out for them. But, you can't really fault them for definitely experimenting, trying, and delivering solid experiences. It's a very tough environment nowadays, and there's just a lot of saturation with the volume of games coming out nowadays. So I can't really say much else beyond that. But this investment group, I don't think they're going to back down because they have been really riding Square on this one. Moving on to some Xbox Game Studios news with, first, this was technically outside of the TGAs, but South of Midnight, Compulsion Games' recent title, that is coming to Switch and PlayStation 5, so that was confirmed. I don't remember the date, but I'll flash it on screen for you real quick. The primary story here, though, is Microsoft Flight Simulator 24, which recently launched on PlayStation 5. It's also getting PSVR 2 support as well. And recently speaking with XDAdevelopers.com, we have the franchise boss, Jorg Newman, where they revealed they pitched a PS5 version early on when they were developing the 2024 version. But Xbox said no at the time, and then apparently Sony eventually asked for the game. And this should have been around the time that all the games were coming over. So I guess at that point, Sony was the one that asked, and then Xbox agreed. And Sony was also pretty clear about PSVR 2 support from the beginning. So that was always in the pipeline for this game as well. They considered releasing an early version of the PSVR 2 support for launch because, again, the game just came out. Doesn't have VR2 support just yet. But Jorg did confirm they decided against that since they're not 100% there just yet. But it is a really cool anecdote to hear that, one, Sony was like, hey, can we get that game? And oh, by the way, we really think you should do PSVR 2 support as well. That's something that does happen internally at PlayStation. They do still champion VR2 experiences. They can't reasonably be doing those games with first party, but I would certainly make the argument that I would love to see them scout out more studios and make some agreements by way of that. But it seems like what they do tend to do is simply go to other known VR experiences and say, hey, can we get that game? We have a very dedicated VR audience. And so it's cool that they were very supportive and wanted that in there for MS Flight Simulator, which will no doubt be kind of similar to Gran Turismo 7 in that is like the way to play that game if you have a PlayStation VR 2. Next up, the long-standing Tekken series producer and director Katsuhiro Harada-san is leaving Bandai Namco after 30 years. Confirmed on Twitter on their personal account, they are leaving very soon at the end of this year. And also as a celebration, they put out a 60-minute non-stop Tekken DJ mix with the announcement as well, which is a very baller way to announce that you are leaving the franchise. But 30 years is insane because the franchise turned 30 years, and the guy basically grew up, with Bandai Namco. And, Tekken, it's a multi-plat game, sure, but it tends to be quite synonymous with PlayStation and PlayStation history. And it's so cool that we had Tekken 3 recently ship on PlayStation 5. That game is still just so nostalgic to me. And so Harada-san is, he played a big role throughout games history, and I think for a lot of people, we have him to thank for some countless hours on the Tekken series, on those games, and getting mad at our friends and just having those long nights. And so it's always a big deal when a big name like Harada is leaving their long-standing partner, their publisher, moving on to do different things. And so, I'll certainly follow Harada-san and see where he does end up and what he tries to do after his life from Bandai Namco. But it's also one of those things where a lot of these guys, after 30-something years at these companies, like they eventually come to the idea of like, I think it's time to move on. So a new generation coming in to lead the Tekken franchise. Now, we would be remiss to not mention the massive news story that broke out before LTPS last week and also Click R3, which is Netflix acquiring Warner Brothers for $82 billion, or they are going to do that. It depends on regulatory approval, and also this new bid from Paramount Skydance for $100 billion. They came in after the fact, but it's still a very big, massive entertainment deal where Netflix would be bringing on the movie and TV business and also Warner Brothers games, and that is going to include all these subsidiaries and IP, so NetherRealm and Mortal Kombat, Rocksteady with Batman, Avalanche with Hogwarts Legacy. So the crazier news here more recently is that during an investor call, the co-CEO Gregory Peters said they did not consider any value with WB Games, saying the portion of the business is minor compared to the grand scheme of things, which Gregory does clarify that WB Games has done good work, there's good people there, but it wasn't factored into the deal or model that they looked at all, even though they would be getting them. So that's kind of insane to think that for an $82 billion acquisition, that portion of the business had no value to them, factoring in the model of what, how they came to the conclusion of, okay, we'll put in a bid, $82 billion, and they'll accept it. So this one's, it's massive. This is mega consolidation. You don't want to see this go through. There is no good result where if they go to Netflix, if they go to Paramount, you just don't want to see something like this go down. It's less consumer choice. Its prices going up. This is insane. It's massive. And anytime there is mega consolidation like this, it doesn't take very long for those redundancies to take place, mass layoffs, closures at multiple subsidiaries, and that's rolling in, all the complicated nature of payroll and things like that. It's a whole mess. And so this is just such a big deal. You would love to think that there is a regulatory process that is going to prevent this from happening. But looking back at what has happened so far, I don't see that happening either. You know what I mean? So not to be overly pessimistic, but this is just an outlandish deal. And I don't know what it would even mean for like the gaming portion of the business. Not to say like, oh, they didn't consider it at all, so that means by the time they're acquired, they're just going to sell them off or close them. I don't think that would happen. It's just, the news is that they weren't really factored into the deal, right? So with that said, we will watch this one very closely and see what happens to some very well-known studios and successful IP that, at least in the scope of this deal, were inconsequential. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X. And if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it's so easy. You can follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and we had a lot going on this past week. So we had, I think on Sunday, the big rumor for Sony allegedly urging their devs to use low power mode on PS5 in anticipation of the rumored PS6 handheld, and also there's a PSSR rumor for PS5 Pro in there, so we wanted to be more timely on that big next-gen rumor. And then we also had a PS5 5-year review, a more casual 20-minute conversation going over hardware, the games, PS Plus, the product ecosystem, how I feel about it so far 5 years in. And then again, yesterday was the PS3 Emulation coverage. So if you want to see more of that game, check that out. And then coming up, I'll probably just do like a highlights reaction of the TGAs. That'll be up relatively soon. I don't know when, but that'll be coming up after this LTPS. And then probably another Tuesday upload as per usual. I think me and John are doing Click R3 this week, so be on the lookout for that. And then not Click R3, 30 Platinums Part 4. I wish I could give updates, but I'm editing on it almost every day. There's just so much more footage. I'm not even sure if I'll make it by the end of this year, which would suck because, the higher ad rates are during this time. So it would be really a big bummer if such a big upload will not be able to make it a little bit in time. But we will see. I'll keep you updated. I hope you thoroughly enjoy what I am working on, which every day it's shaping up and looking better and better. But that's what's going on with 30 Platinums. And that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.